Hi, it's Richard here from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting with a video about the flow debugger. As many of you will know, the next generation flows are in limited release, and they are also provided as part of the GitHub samples with a student benefits project that you can run and test using the flow debugger. So I'm just going to fire up the Node.js Webpack server, which is what they use in the example to host the flow. I also need to make sure in my environment that I have the necessary permissions so that my Webpack server on localhost 8081 can access both the hub APIs and the interview APIs. And I also need to make sure that I have a API client, which is also set up to target the flow which is in a particular workspace. I'm going to make sure that my flow is deployed. This is the flow. It's a copy of student benefits provided on the sample GitHub. And it is also necessary for me to make sure that I have a flow scheme. And I'm just going to tidy up, or at least try and tidy up, some of the extra flow schemes I have here. Now that my Webpack server is up and running on localhost 8081, which explains why I needed to set up permissions for localhost 8081 as far as the hub API and the interview API was concerned, I'm going to open that up. I'm going to fill in the various pieces of information, including my client ID and the URL of my hub. I'm going to get my authorization token. I'm going to fill in the name of the deployment down here. I'm going to say that I want to run it in debug, and I'm going to then get my JW token, which means I can then start the flow. The flow in this case comes set up with a couple of example fake data actions. So I'm going to set it up to run as if there was no data being loaded into the flow. And here is my flow, and on the right hand side you can see the flow now in debug mode offers me a hierarchical view of all of the pages and page groups in my flow, and I can also click on any item in my pages, whether they're visible at the moment or not. So let's pick an item that isn't currently visible. Actually, let's start off by entering some data just to show you the flow experience in its current basic format, and I can click on any item in the flow, so pages and controls, to see whether those items would be visible or not. So this should feel very familiar to you. This is a bit like the left-hand side of the debugger when you're in interview mode. And I can also go into the rules. And this is very similar to those of you who will know the decision service live mode. So I can combine the two. I can basically combine looking at visibility of items in my flow and working with the flow, as you can see, going backwards and forwards, entering data, changing data, observing that my status has changed, and at the same time as viewing the flow structure in the debugger, I can also then go and see how that has been affecting the execution of the rules. So you can see that I'm now in the rule section, so I can see the little yellow tooltips which tell me the actual live values of these attributes, of these fields. And I can scroll through and I can identify which ones were relevant, which ones were set in a rule, which value was selected, and so on and so forth. So I have a very fully spec'd out debugger to enable me to look at the flow state and understand how values were set, drill down on items, see the rules that set the value. So this is very similar in some instances to, and I can also look at the data actions for export and for starting the flow and ending the flow. But this is very similar to using the debugger in Oracle Policy Modeling, where you have access to the rules, the current values, but also you have access to the screens and the stages, and you can click on them and you can view their relevance and you can view their visibility. So this introduces a whole new level of flexibility to flow deployments, because I can now run it in debug and see the debugger on the right-hand side of the page. So this was all made possible thanks to the Oracle Intelligent Advisor samples on GitHub, and they include the student benefit project for flows. They include a sample scheme for the same flow, and they include complete details of how to download and get this running. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you get to test it. See you again soon.